Always well. Good morning, world. This is Kymone Freeman, Angry Black Man in Therapy, representing We Act Radio, broadcasting live from the radical side of Martin King Avenue in the heart of Washington, D.C., the nation's capital. And I'm honored to be joined by an distinguished guest and a fellow colleague in the independent media world. For those who do not know, six corporations control most of what we see, hear, and read. And until we do something different, we are the media that is going to challenge the status quo. But before we go, we got a few announcements. One, happy holidays. We understand, unfortunately, in the reality of application of independent media, we have to tell you that not only do robberies go up during the holidays, suicide goes up during the holidays, and that we need to check on each other and do not accept "I'm fine" as an answer. And unfortunately, since the pandemic, the highest increase in suicides have been with Black people. So we hope everyone is well and we're taking care of each other, because the new pandemic is depression, all right? Don't believe smiling faces, all right? From Anthony Bourdain to Twitch to this beautiful sister who was a beauty queen, to Robin Williams. They were smiling every day. And they obviously was dealing with a lot of pain. So we hope that each and every one of you are checking on each other, all right? And also, we want to send our condolences to Mumia Abu Jamal's wife, who has passed away. Her services have been held today in Philadelphia. Her name is Wadia Jamal. And I don't know what was the cause of her death, but it just, my heart goes out to the Mumia family. Hope he would be coming home soon, and a new trial that will send him home soon. But unfortunately, she won't be there to greet him when he is finally released from being unjustly incarcerated. So again, our condolences to Wadia Jamal on her passing, and her funeral has been held today in Philadelphia. Now, having said all that, I want to introduce to you another young man. This is Wayne Young, publisher of Port of Harlem magazine, portofharlem.net for more information. Brother Wayne, welcome to We Act Radio.
Well, thank you so much. It's good to see you. Come on.
This is the last live broadcast of We Act Radio in 2022, and the first broadcast having Port of Harlem on. So to our listening audience, please, brother, introduce yourself and tell them about the fabulous work and history of Port of Harlem magazine.
Well, Port of Harlem, as many readers may already know, or listeners may already know, we've been around since 1995. And with an inclusive, diverse Pan-African magazine, we started off as being an imprint publication, and we matured as the economy and the culture and the technology matured. So we're completely green now. So we deliver the magazine by email every other week on a Thursday, but we're also on Facebook and Instagram. The vast majority of our readers live in Metro DC, but our second highest number live in Banjul, which is in Gambia on Africa's west coast, and the third highest is in Nairobi. So we're glad to have, So we're glad to have a world African readership. Oftentimes when we interview people, we include people from Denmark. One of our good contributors is Afro-Denmark person. I don't know what they'll call a person, Afro-Scandinavian or Afro, I don't know for sure what you call people from Denmark. But yeah.
I call them Black.
Yeah, but they still have that nuance. So
yeah, all the time. So you said your third largest publication market is Nairobi?
Yeah, I should say the largest is DC, of course. And the second highest is Nairobi. The third is Banjul. For the longest, it's always been Banjul, been second. But recently, Nairobi has come in second, and Banjul is third.
Okay. And the reason I brought that up, because the first time I went to the motherland, and the longest time I spent in the motherland was in Nairobi.
Gotcha.
I was part of the American Friends Service Committee in 2004. And I was there for the Good Quaker organization, by the way.
Well, Quakers historically have been good people, so we get the point.
Yeah. So 6 weeks of a leadership conference. I was actually paid. I received a stipend to be there, and I credit that with being like my graduate school. That gave me my worldview. That connected the dots. That made me understand how you can colonize an economy, how the IMF and the World Bank, how it was created, structured, and operate. So it was the world to me, and it also turned me into a writer.
Gotcha.
My time there, because I'm bombarded with all this information, and I'm like, what do I do with it? What do I do? And then it was like, well, a pen is a poor man's weapon. We all have a pen. We all have a voice. What do we do with that? And so I think that is imperative for not only for you and I and our colleagues, but the people in the sound of our voices, to realize that they are empowered with this information, that you just don't supposed to suck it up, get depressed, and go to happy hour, or be dealing with suicide prevention, as we mentioned earlier. But you can use that as fuel to drive you forward. What was that was the impetus that got me started. What got you started with Port of Harlem?
Well, actually, we were involved and still involved with the Black Memorabilia shows. And the Black Memorabilia shows now take place in Gaithersburg. People who've been around for a time remember used to be at the Armory in Silver Spring, which is not even there anymore. And every Christmas or every fall season, Port of Harlem, which at that time was a retailer at vendor events, would give out a collectible. A collectible is something that people collect and eventually hope that it becomes antique and becomes more valuable. And those are the type of things that I sold at the Black Memorabilia show. And so Carl, I forget Carl's last name, Carl Graham was running the Graham collection, which was then in Adams Morgan, which when Adams Morgan at that point was quite different. And he said, well, Wayne, why don't you put the articles that you've been writing for other publications in one place? At that point, I was writing for everybody in DC. You can imagine every magazine and newspaper, but specifically Barry's newspaper, and I can't think of News Dimensions at that point, was probably my home point, and also the Afro. And so we put them all in one point, and it was a magazine, and I thought that was going to be it. But the people who advertised in it said, hey, are you going to do it again this year? And that's how Port of Harlem was born.
Yeah. When I was starting the Black Love Festival, shout out to Chintry Davis, former regional Capital Region Director of the National Park Service, who made it possible for us and gave us the resources to do so at Fort DuPont Amphitheater. For those outside the DMV, that's the second largest amphitheater in the nation's capital. And he turned this on to a little, what do you call it, a loophole. If you're determined to be a special event with National Park Service, then you have to pay for all the costs include, police and facilities and the staff and all that. But if you deem to be a First Amendment activity, if there's information being disseminated and distributed during that event, then it is a First Amendment activity, and it is provided for free. So if the brother didn't hit me to that, the Black Love Festival wouldn't have taken place. And when I did the event, he said, "Congratulations, young man," and he said, "Can't wait to see you again next year." And I'm like, "Next year."
That's a good example of why it's important to understand the system. I mean, for us, we don't bash the system because we are a part of the system. The point is whether or not you're going to learn and engage or just be a bystander. We chose to engage.
Well, I have no problem with that, but I think that for me, speaking for one half of We Act Radio, the verdict is still out. Whether is it the system that's broke that needs to be fixed, or is the system fixed and needs to be broken? I think
it can be broken, but the thing is, we're part of the system, so we're part of the brokenness. So that's what I'm saying.
So repairing any aspect of ourselves is going to be repairing some aspect of society.
Exactly, because we are part of society. You're either going to be part of it or you're going to be bystanders. You're
going
to be on the table or under the table.
We'll work with that, but at the same time, in an effort to walk and chew gum, we have to call out things as we see it. Again, in the need for independent media. We were just recently outraged. I don't know if you're aware of this, but Masterclass who is a wonderful organization that disseminates a lot of great information. But we was disappointed to see Masterclass blemish their brand with audacious claims attributed to war criminals. And we're talking specifically about George Bush, Madeleine Albright, and Condoleezza Rice, who hosted masterclass sessions. For George Bush, he's teaching authentic leadership, even though he had a war over a lie. But the authenticity, he somehow is a masterclass facilitator for teaching authentic leadership. And then Madeleine Albright and Condoleezza Rice are tag teaming to teach diplomacy. Madeleine Albright is famous for saying on 60 Minutes now, she didn't whisper this into a hot mic. She said this on 60 Minutes, that over 1 million children has died in Iraq. Here we go, Iraq again, something they all have in common, has died due to the sanctions. Do you think it's worth it? And she says, yes, I think it's worth it.
Yeah, but so, Albright, she's deceased now, isn't she?
I'm sorry?
Is she lady that died recently?
I hope so. And I'm pretty sure, yeah. She's no. Well, no.
Mother Albright.
No. This is recent. This is current. So
because I know they have her and Condoleezza Rice had a video out, but I think
Margaret Thatcher. I think you're thinking of Margaret Thatcher.
No, I think there's a lady who turned 90 and she was like the Secretary of State at one point.
Yeah, Madeleine Albright.
She was Secretary of State, correct?
Dead, then this was pre-recorded, but she is on.
But she was the Secretary of State, correct?
Yes.
Yeah, I think she's the one that's deceased. And she's the one that was a supporter of Hillary Clinton and said that there's a special place in hell for women who don't vote for Hillary.
I don't know about that one, because she was a Republican.
Madeleine Albright, I'm not too sure. I think she was a Democrat, and Condoleezza wanted the Republican. Because she even asked,
let me clean that up. Let's clean that up.
Because she even asked Condoleezza, how could she be a Republican when they both were taught by her father? Because her father was a diplomat before she was.
Let's clear that up. Yep, she was with the Democratic Party. You're correct.
And her father then was the one that was a diplomat before she, and she taught both her and Condoleezza. And she asked Condoleezza, how could you be a Republican? We both got to head the same teacher.
Well, Condoleezza Rice said that growing up in Birmingham, Alabama, and she knew a couple of one of the 4 little girls that was bombed.
Right.
Said that she never had a racist incident in her childhood.
Well, I mean, all of these people.
Condoleezza.
I understand what you're saying, but all of them, I think that they're individuals. They're humans. They're not perfect. They don't always say good things. They always say bad things. But I love what the Congressional Black Caucus always says, and that we have permanent interests.
But their interests are not serving us. Their interests are not serving us.
We have permanent. I'm just saying that's their comment, that we have permanent interest. And having a permanent interest, there's some things I like about Condoleezza.
What do you like about Condoleezza? Because let me say this. My mother loves Condoleezza Rice. She thinks she's just a brilliant woman that's doing her job. So that's going to give you that caveat. But the floor is yours. What do you like about Condoleezza?
My point was that I like something about all of them. And I
what do you like about Condoleezza? That's my question.
Let me finish this. There's something I like about all of them, and there are things I dislike about all of them. But if I had to put Condoleezza herself on the scale, there's more dislikes than likes. And one of the issues I do have, and what I'll join with you on, is her concept of her living in Birmingham and growing up in Birmingham. And I do recall when she spoke of growing up with one or a couple of the 3 or 4 little girls who were, the 3 of them died, and one of them I think is still alive and has an eye problem. But when she spoke of them as if they were okay, and as though she just lived through it. And I'm thinking back, growing up in Gary, we didn't have anybody famous who died on the streets, but there's lots of people who I grew up with, who I walked to school with, who got shot by bullets. And I kept thinking, maybe she's related to those 3 little girls the way I relate to those guys who got killed. But the people who get killed on the streets back home, they weren't at the same stature as the 3 little girls, and the struggle wasn't the same. They all got killed, but the struggle was different. But it's just that she constantly says things, in my opinion, that are so off base that on the surface you're like, okay, I understand you, I'll follow you, but then become so off base. And one of those comments that was so off base is how she related to those girls passing. But what's even deeper than that, in my opinion, is her saying that her mom participated in the civil rights movement. And I guess she's saying her mom participated by going to the white department store and demanding that she put on some clothes. And I'm thinking, that's really a privileged position, that, you know, your mom was so, you
Or maybe,
know, because they're part of the middle class.
yeah,
And the
maybe
big
that's
story
why
to me,
maybe that's why she
big,
was trying on Ferragamos when Hurricane Katrina and the levees broke and people was drowning in New Orleans and being neglected by her administration.
well, she came up from a different environment. I just
Yeah,
put
she
that way.
did.
A different environment than I can relate to initially. But I would just say that, you know, my biggest, and the biggest impact she left on me when she made those stories, and I thought about being on tour in Selma and speaking to the people who actually got bitten by dogs, etc. And one thing the lady made very clear, and I hope she's still alive, she said, you know, most of the people who were marching in Selma came from the projects that was across the street from the church where they met. So those are the people who crossed the bridge. It wasn't the middle class, it was people from the projects. And she said she was one of them people. And so Condoleezza being part of the middle class, her mother being a teacher, I believe, her biggest contribution was to go to the store and to try on some clothes that white folks only had put on. I'm like, I couldn't put the two together.
Well, there you have it. And before we pivot, I wanted to make sure this is known, because sometimes, you know, history is being rewritten right before our eyes, and Masterclass is contributing to it with this President Bush teaching authentic leadership. If there was ever a stolen presidential election, it was George Bush in 2000, when his brother delivered Florida to him and the Supreme Court gave him the White House. And this resulted in the murderous robbery of Iraq over lies. And for those who want to know why Floetis, Barack Obama's First Lady, Michelle Obama, loves George Bush, because they have so much in common. What do they have in common? They invaded Iraq when Saddam announced that he was no longer accepting American dollars for oil, but he's switching to the euro. They came for him. In the Barack Obama administration, when Gaddafi announced that they no longer accepting U.S. money for their oil, they're switching for a gold standard, and they was going to have it backed up by a United African Union currency. They came for him. You know, those are the tail signs of when they went in. It's not always what they do; it's also sometimes when they do it. So just want to throw that out there. We're living.
Well, I hear you, but my biggest concern now is not to rewash those clothes, but to look at what's happening right now.
If we don't wash the clothes, they're still gonna be funky.
Well, right now what's happening, well, the thing is, you won't have any clothes to wear at all, because right now the clothes right now I'm more concerned about washing and wearing is that in Israel right now, they're having a very right-wing government.
Apartheid Israel?
But the thing is, but during this very last administration with Trump, he tied Israel's problems to Africa when he made Morocco accept Israel as being a country or a normalized relationship, and he tied the freedom of the people in Western Sahara to Israel, and the same thing with Sudan. So to me, that's the issue right now that's more important, or the fact that you know, in Somaliland and Somali, those two countries can't decide whether or not to be unified or not be unified, and all that affects all those things affect us right now. And those are things that Black Americans, in my opinion, should be more concerned about than these things of what's happening in Ukraine and what's happening in Iran and Iraq. There are things that are happening right now in Africa that I think we should be much more interested in.
Yeah, and we need to pay attention to AFRICOM, which is basically America's military presence on the continent. The military presence on this planet, the largest military presence on this planet, with over 800 military installations around the world. But we want to talk about Russian aggression. All right. for those who just joined us, I'm here today, joined by Wayne Young, publisher of Port of Harlem Magazine, and you get more information at portofharlem.net. This is the last live broadcast on We Act Radio, and the first broadcast with Wayne Young, and we wanted to make sure that we went out with a bang, and hopefully we will be doing this again in the days to come in 2023. But Mr. Wayne, tell them about Port of Harlem and today's and your next issue that's coming out, and how people can follow you.
Well, the issue that's coming out today, Thursday, comes out every other Thursday. One of our more complete stories, and there are lots of complete stories, but the one that's more complete, and it relates to Africa in particular, is the results of the African Union as we saw it. And we thought the African Union was a great event, and we answered some of the questions that some folks had. Some of our readers, and I mean readers that people interact with on Facebook over a period of time, and we can see what their concerns are. And from that, we research and develop more complete stories for everyone. When you subscribe to the magazine, which is free, it comes out on Thursdays. And then maybe 5 days later, we might post them on, we post them on Facebook and put pictures on Instagram. But the story is about the U.S. Africa Summit that took place last week in DC. And one of the questions that people had in general, why didn't the event take place in Africa? And one of our London people, she's I forget what country she's originally from, but she's based in London now. She's an African human rights advocate. And even she come to terms with the fact that it's good that it's in the United States, because having the cost of just having those conventions or those meetings are astronomical. And the idea of bringing 49 people into one place can be a security nightmare. But she still thinks that in many cases that it's almost like rounding up cattle, and that both China and the United States does that. They invite African leaders to them as opposed to going to Africa and meeting with those people. And
I thought that was a telltale sign. Like, why do you go to Ethiopia, the African Union headquarters for this? They come into your table, and I didn't see much of a difference perspective wise from Trump having all of these HBCUs, historically Black colleges and universities, at the White House. And he took a group photo with them, of course, and President Biden having all the African Union leaders together and taking a group photo with them. The optics were.
No, that was a huge difference. A huge difference.
No,
in Trump's defense, and like I say, I like something about everybody. And one thing I think Trump did is make sure
a broke clock is right 2 times a day. I want to
So I can still tell time. So the point is with Trump is that I believe he did give a large sum of money to the HBCUs, which is great.
That's a similarity.
But some Black people don't even go to HBCUs. They ain't never been to one, and they ain't even donate a dime to one. So I'm glad that he gave money to them. But on the opposite side, with Biden and Harris, two of the greatest things that they've done is to invite or to encourage all countries, including China and Russia and India, to include the African Union in the G20 and at the permanent seat on the UN Security Council. So in both cases, they're elevating not only African countries individually, but African countries collectively to the world stage. And that further support strengthening the AU. That's the absolute greatest thing. And I hope people didn't miss that.
Like, my common thread and my problem with both of those is that it's disingenuous.
You don't want to be sitting at the table. They're putting
when they say permanent interest
at the table.
When they said permanent interests, that's what they mean, and their interests do not coincide with our interests. And the reason
how is not sitting at the G20 not a part of African interest? How is not sitting at the UN Security Council not a part of African interest? How is not including the African Union collectively not a part of the African Union's?
That is assuming. That's assuming we have authentic leadership within the African Union that's going to be at their tables.
I trust Africans will do that. I trust
but verify
that Africans will be able to determine that for themselves.
Trust but verify.
I'm not going to determine it for them.
Well, let's hear directly from the president of OPEC and the African Union, and he was as he was speaking at the U.S. African summit, and have some feedback when we come back from that.
I need to be biased because if Equatorial Guinea have oil and gas today, if Equatorial Guinea have been able to develop, has been by U.S. companies. They are the ones who took the risk. They are the wildcats, and people told them what to do. And they were the ones developing Equatorial Guinea. They did the same thing in Nigeria.
Look who's in the audience.
They did in Mozambique, in all of the places. And what we are not going to do is to abandon a resource that can change our countries. We will continue drilling, we will continue using agriculture because we need them. Anybody who asks any African countries not to develop fossil fuel, honestly speaking, it's a criminal. It's a criminal because he's telling us that we don't have the right to be able to develop that. So I want to be very clear, we will do it with you, with you, with the Chinese, with the Russians, whoever will bring us the money, we will be willing to do the development. And it's not only Equatorial Guinea, do the rest. And I want to tell you one data that is very important. The largest number of members of OPEC this year are African countries. Mozambique going to become the biggest supplier of gas. Senegal, big supplier of gas. Nigeria, Equatorial Guinea, big supplier of gas. So what you're going to have in 2035, you have the African continent with the biggest supply of oil and gas. And for all those people who say that they are not going to want our oil and gas, I will ask them to come back in 3 years and tell me the same. This is very important because I'm here. It's very unfair. It's very cold. They don't want to come. You have to remember we're from Africa. We have our weather. This conference and this event was not supposed to be happening here in the States. President Obama did the first one. He was here. You have to do the same thing that the Chinese do. You have to do the same thing that the Russians do. You do a conference in your continent, you do the next one in the African continent. This is the second time we are here. So I hope the next time we are talking about US-Africa summit, it's not in Washington. That is an African country, so we can actually be able to supply you a hospitality that is also very important. But again, you will see me on television. You will see me next to my Saudi, Qataris, African country, and all of them, they love me because I'm very straightforward on this. This is my bread and butter. This is provide revenue to my country. And under no circumstances, I will apologize not doing that. We are not responsible for the climate problems. The climate problems have two players, the producers and the consumers. And the one who are driving that is the demand. If you want to do something about the climate, change your behavior. Don't drive 2 cars. Don't buy 2 houses. Change that. It's not the producers. So I want to be very clear on that. And it's very important for everybody who's here to understand what I'm saying. And we will continue doing the same thing. Like I said, you need the resources to be able to develop them. What Nigeria have done, what Equatorial Guinea have done, Angola have done, we will continue doing it. And we will make sure, so whoever is willing to come to our countries and develop it, because you can do agriculture, you can do solar, all that, that's not a problem. But I can guarantee you do oil and gas and you will make money. Yeah. This is a capitalist world, this is a capitalist economy. We know clearly what's the value of Africa. If the Chinese come to Africa, it's for something. If the Russia come to Africa, it's for something. You know, we are very good people. But they all come from the research. Whoever is willing to come to our continent and help us to develop the resource, it will be welcome. And I don't care if it's with English, Russian, Chinese, whatever you need to compete, so as with money. So with that, I think I have spoken enough. And very clearly, I want to thank you for.
He has clearly spoken enough.
Yeah, I don't have a problem with that. Because you know, and I take the word reminds me of the story we did called Chambia. And Chambia is what they call Zambia.
Okay, hold on. Let's unpack this slowly. Let me back up. You said
Yeah.
you don't have a problem with what you just heard.
No, because they're an independent country. I mean, you probably have more problems with him as being a leader if I think I got the leader correct. Yeah, so I would have more problem with him as being a leader. But what he's saying, generally speaking, was the same thing the Brazilians are saying and other less developed countries are saying. What he's saying is no different. It's not new.
I think it's part of the same problem. I don't see any difference from what I just saw than when there was post-colonial independence celebrations for these African nations and their former colonizers sitting on stage with them, passing over the keys, the reins of power, because they know that they still have control over their economies, which is why Africa has been undeveloped to begin with. And I don't even know where to start.
I would take issue to that. I think in some parts of Africa more developed than Black America.
I think there's parts of Africa where you can't even drink the water, and he said
there's parts of America you can't even drink the water, starting with Jackson.
So why are we using their model? Exactly, you are absolutely correct. So why
I'm just saying,
why are they
using
their same model?
We have to go all to Africa and point to them and their issues. You can look right here in your own backyard.
But I'm saying it's the same problem. So why are we implementing and still following a westernized economic flawed philosophy? Africa and the global South, for that matter, could be leaders in renewable energies. They could have solar panels. They could have
Black America.
Why are they not doing? But they
want to Black America.
Okay, but that is the problem. That is why I'm making this issue, and that's why I'm having Port of Harlem here, another Black publication, because we need to start to think for ourselves. I don't see self-determination. I see us following a model that they have implemented. That's what I see.
But that's only one tiny African country. There are 54
that
of them.
Is the president of the OPEC and the African Union, and that is unfortunately
he's not the president of the African Union.
Overreigning.
No, Macky Sall from Senegal is the new leader for the African Union.
I said it's OPEC. I said the OPEC.
Okay, not the African Union. But I'm saying that different country.
President of another country in the African Union.
Another country to look at is Botswana. Their philosophy is somewhat different. And I'm not saying that
countries in Africa and Latin America whose philosophy is different than that of America. What happens to them, typically, historically?
You look at. I can say you look at each one of them is different. Each and every last one of them is different. And I'm just saying that when I listen to him talk, I listened to the conference they had downtown at the Wilson Center. The Wilson Center has an African center. It's actually funded by an African American from Baltimore. He's like a millionaire. He actually funds it. It's headed by an a continental African woman. And there was a wonderful discussion they had once before called Chambia. And the reason they call it Chambia because of the Chinese influence in Zambia. And one of the things that struck me the most, how it relates to this, is that he said, yeah, they welcome the Chinese. They welcome the Chinese. They even having the students there learn the Chinese language. And the guy said in particular, the reason why we do that is because Chinese is going to be the future. And we want our children to be a part of the future. So instead of learning Swahili, which I thought, come walking in, maybe they should learn Swahili. Oh, no, he said, no, they're learning the Chinese language. And I was like, wow, that's really deep. But then again, it reminds me of why Port of Harlem has the Port of Harlem Gambian Education Partnership. Why nonprofit is in the Gambia? Because a friend of mine once asked me 20 years ago when we started the nonprofit, he said, Wayne, why aren't there any African Americans here helping us develop the Gambia? And I said, well, Jabbai, your children will never be able to say that. And so even today, when you go to the Gambia,
I hope you're right.
Well, even today, when you go to the Gambia and you're talking about solar, there is an African American that does have a solar company there. So I'm saying that there are different countries, 54 different countries, and they have 54 different agendas. And even within those countries, there's several agendas, that, to just say that this one guy is following a particular model is just that. It's just one guy. That's all I can say, just one guy. And, we can look right here at home and think, well, wow, we have all these Black people we're in the wealthiest, most educated Black country in the world. I hope I got that right. The wealthiest and most educated Black country in the world. And yet, if we wanted to critique other people, If we want to critique other people, we can critique ourselves. We can go right to Jackson, Mississippi, Gary, Indiana, Detroit, Michigan, and see what are we doing with our territories.
Now you using we? Who's we, Kim Osabi?
We as Black Americans.
Because in
Or
Flint,
we
Michigan, that wasn't black people in charge of that. In Jackson, Mississippi, that wasn't black people in charge of that.
We're in charge of it now. And in Gary, Indiana, we're in charge
those
of our
Republican governors that overrode the autonomy of the Democratic elected cities there, and that is a common thread. And then your boy, Barack Obama. Because I have a novel coming out about the water wars, Nineveh, conflict over water set in the future, dropping in 2023 on MOK Day, by the way. And for those in DC, it's at Sankofa Video Bookstore, 4 p.m. to 6 p.m. And of course, somebody's going to be calling us doing a broadcast. I apologize in advance. I'm sorry, guys. That is Negroes with Guns with Robert Williams that just opened up for those who don't recognize that theme song, one of my heroes. But Barack Obama, when he made a speech in Flint, Michigan, he coughed 18 times during that speech, asked for water 2 times during that speech, because that was political theater. And for the most part, that is what we will continue to see until we demand something different. I say this again. Barack Obama went to Flint, Michigan and coughed 18 times in his speech and asked for water twice. And then they brought out finally a glass of water, and he swore it wasn't a publicity stunt because he was really thirsty. Took one small sip and that was it. Okay.
Well, you know what? Again, let me tell you what we're doing right now. I like rehashing those stories in the past. But let me tell you what was happening to President, like for instance, in Gary, Indiana. As you know, that across the country, there are hospitals being closed in Black neighborhoods. Even here in Metro DC, you have the hospital on Southern Avenue, which people don't necessarily love, and you have the one up in Providence, which is closed. Well, in Gary, which is 80% Black, we still have a hospital. And even though we're in a very red state, which is the home of Mike Pence, you ask, why does the hospital still stay open in Gary? That's because in 1972, Richard Hatcher made sure there was an agreement that said that whatever happened to the hospital in downtown Gary had to happen in the suburbs. The exact same thing. So I'm saying that's a model you can look at, whether it's in Mississippi or in Indiana, to make sure that there's some equity in both the Black neighborhoods and non-Black neighborhoods. When you talk about water in particular, the same thing with Gary water, because our water is tied with the white people's water. So whatever they get, we get. So I'm saying there are models that we have here to follow. And just to say, well, in Flint, they did this, or in Jackson, they did that. I mean, Black Americans themselves could be like continentals, get together and have a discussion and find out what's the best way to function in the environment that you're in. And I'm just giving you a good example. I'm giving you a good example of what's happening right now in one particular majority Black city, while the water is still good and while the hospital is still there.
Well, that's an ongoing debate, and hopefully
the hospital is still
others
there.
in the Sound of Our Voice can continue to have this conversation and move us forward, because we do need to have an examination of this misleadership and the self-determination for us to challenge it. I'm glad you brought up the term equity. And I urge everybody in the Sound of Our Voice to look up the word equity. I was a grown-ass man before I understood the difference between equality and equity. If you look at Google equity right now, and click on images, you'll see the images of 3 boys at a baseball game that they don't have money for a ticket for, and they're trying to watch the game over the fence. Equality is to give each one of those boys a box to stand on. Equity realizes and acknowledges that each of those boys are 3 different heights, and that the tallest boy doesn't need a box. He can already see over the fence, and the shortest needs 2 boxes for him to be able to see over the fence. And so here in Washington, D.C., who is led by a Black woman mayor, by the way, Washington, D.C., the nation's capital, is the most dangerous city in all of America for a Black woman of any socioeconomic background to give birth. It has the highest maternal mortality rate in the country and one of the highest infant mortality rates in the country. The poverty rate is higher than the national average. The illiteracy rate is higher than the national average. And of course, it's people that look like us that's comprising those numbers. And just because our mayor looks like us, you would think that that wouldn't be the case, but it is. But to her credit, she has introduced the Racial Equity Action Plan. And this is what they have to say. She had to say, we must be intentional about ending structural racism and reversing the legacy of policies that intentionally lock people out of opportunity. That is what the Racial Equity Action Plan will help us do. And that's Madam Mayor Muriel Bowser saying this. And
yeah, to her credit too, you know, and I'm
hold
not.
on. I'm gonna put this out there. Hold on. The public can submit comments on this Racial Equity Action Plan until January the 2nd. And you can get more information at the Office of Racial Equity. Or also follow We Act Radio's Facebook page. It's pinned to the top. And I urge everyone to sign up a voice and the readers of Port of Harlem to provide input into this Racial Equity Action Plan until January the 2nd. All right, and that's what we have to put out there into the ether. Do something.
Well, I think it's great. That's what people should do, because we're part of the system, and to be a part of the good part of the system, you have to participate. And I encourage people to participate, but also participate in getting a free book. You know, in DC, unlike in other places in other countries, here you can get a free book sent to your house every month. So people can sign up, and people send a book to your child. I think they had to be under 5 or something like that. It's a late age limit, but you get a free book sent to your house every single month.
Well, I'm glad to hear that. And in Washington, D.C., we are divided by a river, and east of the river has been historically neglected, underfunded.
It looks like that land is being erased.
Well, some of it does need to be.
I don't know, because when that line is erased, it most likely means that you're going to be across the border next.
But We Act Radio is headquartered in Anacostia, east of the river, and we're not being erased. And we're going to make sure that there's going to be equity here in the nation's capital, east of the river. And that's an ongoing debate and challenge. And I hope everyone will join us and rise to the occasion, because settlers displacing natives is nothing new. And so, but what is new is our responses to that. All right. So we're coming to the end of our time here. So I want to make sure that we wrap up on a high note and understand that you and I are colleagues, and this was a healthy debate, and we need to have these conversations as we struggle and try to wrap our minds around how we can get this system to bend to our will and to have authentic leadership that is actually thinking for ourselves, doing for ourselves, and not just a carbon copy of what we have seen imposed upon ourselves. And so with that, I leave the floor for yours for closing comments, and you can let the folks know what's been addressed in the upcoming issue of Port of Harlem and what's new in 2023 for you and yours.
Well, like I said before, we present a lot of stories, and a lot of our stories are in depth. And like one of the newest stories that brought us to this conversation was the story on what happened at the U.S.-Africa Summit. And again, there's 54 different African countries. And even within those countries, there are different issues. And generally speaking, they are their leaders, no matter how they were elected, whether you or I or the United States support how they were elected and how long they stay in office. They are their leaders. And with them being their leaders, they all have different opinions. And that's what we looked at. We looked at different countries. We also looked at what the Biden-Harris administration has done. And the point is that whether or not the sixth region, which are those in the diaspora, the sixth region part of the African Union, responds or not. There are new opportunities. And if you don't know what they are, you just miss them. And that's why, like when you said, there's this opportunity now for people to participate in the local mayors, DC mayors program to bring a more equitable life in DC. People should participate. And so we give examples of what's coming up with the African Union, and there are examples of people can participate.
And there you have it. That's Wayne Young, founder and publisher of Port of Harlem, portofharlem.net. Is that correct?
Exactly.
And you have been in publication for how long, brother?
Since 1995. We went from print to being told electronic. Most of our circulation then were in DC, and we had a small circulation in London, a small circulation in Banjul. Now that we're completely online, it's always good to see our Gambians participate. Even our Facebook page, people come on sometime with these comments. It's like, dude, that does not work in the Gambia. And I love when the Gambians respond, or even when our contributors from Wyoming get people straight about issues that they think they know so much about just because they live in a certain locality.
All right. I remember those print publications. I had quite a few of them. I wish I was able to hold on to quite a few of them because they was unfortunately put into a storage unit that I got behind in payment and lost possession of. But I had quite a few of Port of Harlem publications, and I hope I could find one in my current storage space. And I just want to say that hats off to you, brother, for the work you put in. I know your heart is in the right place. I know you're doing the work that needs to be done, and it has been a big inspiration to me over the years. And I'm honored to have you on today to speak with you, and for the last live broadcast of 2022 on WEAC Radio, but the first broadcast with Port of Harlem. And I hope to have many more opportunities to speak with you in the future, and if not, work with you in the future as we try to wrestle with these issues in the years and days to come. I wish you and you the best in the new year. You got any closing comments, any shout outs? As WEAC Radio, we do shout outs.
That's pretty much it. But thank you for the time.
All right, I want to thank you, and then in closing, we want to say that in the new year, we need you to do something. And in the words of our cultural philosopher Ice-T, he says, "You have to accept
everybody count. Oh yeah, everybody counts."
That's right. You have to accept the fact that no matter who you are or what you do, everyone is not going to like you. So F them and stay on your path. That's a Black proverb for you. And this is 2023 ready. This is Kymone Freeman, WEAC Radio, and wishing you and yours the best in the new year. Support Port of Harlem .net. Support independent media. Free Mumia Abu-Jamal. Free Julian Assange. And do something. Stay woke. Peace.